Hi everyone, so we're going to do this by table light. Thank you to everyone who's been commenting and who's joined the channel and all that kind of good stuff, who's supporting the channel. It's a lovely kind of symbiotic thing we've got going on. I post videos and you with your kindness and your support keep the channel going and growing. So I really appreciate it, and I do want to just thank you. I'm all of a sudden conscious that I finished eating dinner a few minutes ago and I didn't brush my teeth yet and blah, blah, blah. So who knows what you're going to see. So irrespective. The current energies are captured in my last video concerning the full moon in Pisces on August the 30th. On the heels of the Sun opposing Saturn today, August the 27th, earlier today. So that's really the most current energy. But we've also got Venus and Mercury retrograde. And I have done videos on both Venus and Mercury retrograde. And after I did the videos on Venus and Mercury retrograde, I did a video on the Leo new moon. And we are still very much under that Leo lunar cycle. You know, we're going to have the full moon on Wednesday on August the 30th, and then for another 14 days after that we're still going to be in the Leo lunar cycle. And I tend to think about Leo season as being from the new moon in Leo to the new moon in Virgo, but I'm going to leave that to everyone. And with all of a sudden this kind of idea of Leo season and Virgo season is fascinating. It's taken on such currency. But I did want to do a video to touch base on the retrograde energies, which are also current and are going to start to become more relevant as we pass August the 30th and as we head into the next weekend. September 4th to 6th have some important milestone dates attached to them. Some of them concern the retrogrades. One important date, of course, is on the day that Venus goes direct, September the 4th, Jupiter goes retrograde. So we have another planet going retrograde, but mercifully Venus goes direct. And I thought that there was one error I made in the Mercury retrograde video that I corrected briefly in the full moon video for Pisces that I did. And I wanted to correct more formally in a retrograde video. And there were some other things and other thoughts that I did not share in those last two videos that I wanted to. So think of this as sort of a retrograde, a button to the two retrograde videos I've done, sort of a retrograde wrap-up video, even though the retrogrades do not wrap up, at least the retrogrades that I'm talking about here, Venus and Mercury retrograde, don't wrap up till September the 15th. When a planet is going retrograde, the first thing I wanted to remind everyone is that the house that the planet is retrograde in and transiting, and the houses that the planet rules, are the ones that are going to be most affected by the retrograde. So if Venus, what house is Venus in? What house is Mercury in? They're going to be in successive houses because Venus is retrograde in Leo and Mercury is retrograde in Virgo, and those signs follow each other. So they're going to be in successive houses. But those of you who know your chart, those of you who know your rising sign, and I read whole charts with the whole signs, WHOLE, however you want to do it. This is really not the space for an argument about whole signs, which can become very passionate and almost silly, I think, sometimes. But irrespective, which part of the chart are Venus and Mercury in and where they're retrograde? And it is likely that those parts of the chart are going to be significantly affected by the retrogrades. In Mercury's case, one of the two houses that Mercury rules, Mercury is actually transiting in right now. Mercury rules Virgo and Gemini. So in Venus's case, Venus is retrograde in Leo, but Venus also rules Taurus and Libra. So those three houses are going to be most impacted by the Venus retrograde, and Mercury rules Virgo and Gemini, and Mercury is in Virgo. So with Mercury, two houses are impacted, specifically Virgo and Gemini. And the Virgo house is probably the most impacted Part of the reason why the Virgo house is the most impacted by Mercury retrograde is that Mercury is going to conjunct the Sun on September the 6th. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. And when a retrograde Mercury or a retrograde planet conjuncts the Sun, it starts a new cycle. At least with Mercury and Venus, I can say that, and especially with Mercury, I can say that. So Mercury is currently wrapping up a Mercury cycle related to the sign of Taurus, where it last, when it was retrograde, conjuncted the Sun. And now it's going to start up a Virgo Mercury cycle starting September the 6th until it connects with the Sun in either Capricorn or Sagittarius at the end of the year when it's retrograde again. And I can't remember right now where it's going to do that. But irrespective, it's going to start up. And those of you who know your chart and understand it must know just how current and how volatile the Virgo part of your chart is right now. We covered some of this when I was talking about the full moon in Pisces on August the 30th. Because the Sun, as it opposes Saturn in Pisces, of course, the Sun is in Virgo when it does that. And when we've got the full moon in Pisces, the Sun is going to be opposing Saturn and the moon, or really the moon, technically, at the time of the full moon. But the Sun, or any of the planets, like Mars, which has just entered Libra today, but spent about 45 days in Virgo, Mars the Virgo part of our chart is very, very alive. Not only the planets, as they transit through Virgo, make trines to Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus, but they also oppose Saturn and Neptune and Pisces. And if you want more details on what this could mean, I'm going to refer you back to the last 4 videos that I've done, but particularly the Pisces full moon video. I don't want to spend 15 minutes rehashing stuff that we just talked about yesterday. But in the middle of this turmoil, in the middle of this, again, change energy, expansive energy, we're dealing with the caution and the restriction from the Pisces part of the chart that we have to pay attention to over the next few days. And indeed, we just need to continue to pay attention to it. Because as I said yesterday, the expansiveness really concerns the Leo and Virgo parts of our chart, either egging on or supporting the Taurus and Aries parts of our chart. But the Pisces part of the chart is the most precarious and the most vulnerable, and is in the need of the most kind of detail-oriented and responsible and diligent attention. But that means that with Mars just having gone through Virgo, and Mercury retrograde in Virgo, and the Sun going through Virgo, and a new moon and a new Mercury cycle starting on Virgo on September the 6th, and a new moon in the sign of Virgo on September the 14th, and then Venus coming into Virgo October 9th, that the Virgo part of the chart is stewing, boiling, changing, evolving, going through its transitions and transformations. And with Mercury retrograde, it's also probably the part of the chart where we are feeling and finding the most slowdowns and delays and restrictions and cosmic slowdowns. A need for us to really pay attention to when things are out of our control, and there are delays and there are slowdowns and there's a rethinking and there's turmoil and there's change. And remember that we are in this 2-week period, the week before and after August 28th, 2 months before the Taurus eclipse on October the 28th, when changes could feel more dramatic than just normal changes. And this is the last of the retrogrades, the Mercury retrograde in Virgo, that is purely in an earth sign. The next time we see a retrograde, which will be in Capricorn, Mercury will briefly dip into Sagittarius too while it is retrograde and then go direct and into Capricorn. And so the Capricorn part of the chart and the Taurus part of the chart and the Virgo part of the chart, since November 2022, have been supporting each other and egging each other on. And so now here we are in the Virgo part of the chart. And Virgo is almost the part of the chart that is turning the key to help create this change. Also know that when planets go through Virgo, they're going to trine Pluto in Capricorn as they make their way out of there. Mars in the last few days trined Pluto. None of the other planets have made their way from Virgo to Libra yet, but when they do, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, they will trine Pluto in Capricorn. So not only will these planets be giving their support to the planets in Taurus, Jupiter, and Uranus, they will also be giving that support to Pluto in Capricorn again. But the short-term cauldron brewing is in the sign of Virgo. And there could be change, and there could be slowdowns, and there could be frustration. And depending on which part of the chart Virgo sits in, it could feel quite momentous. Now, when we look at retrograde planets, one of the things I pay attention to is as a planet is moving forward, and planets, when they move forward, are typically getting ready to make aspects, always as they're moving, aspecting other planets. And in Mercury's case, Mercury was getting ready to do three things before it went retrograde. In order of urgency, it was going to trine Uranus in Taurus. It was going to oppose Neptune in Pisces. And then it was going to trine Pluto. Excuse the siren. It was going to trine Pluto in Capricorn before making its way into Libra. But of course, before any of that could happen, Mercury went retrograde. So those three culminations were aborted so that Mercury could, as if to say, I am not ready to make these transits yet. I'm not ready to meet up with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the three outermost planets in Taurus, Pisces, and Capricorn, respectively. Now, after Mercury goes direct, it is going to trine Uranus on September the 30th, oppose Neptune on October the 2nd, and I would imagine shortly, October 5th, 6th, somewhere down there, around there. Shall I give you the date for when it's going to trine Pluto? Give me 1 sec, let me do that. But the bottom line is, that is what Mercury is going to do. And again, you have the support, and again, I'm going to refer you back to the full moon in Pisces video for what I'm going to say next. You have the support to the expansiveness and the authenticity and the independence in the Taurus part of the chart. You have the looking at and continuing to come up with a plan, and this has been happening in stages with Mars opposing Saturn and Neptune, and the Sun opposing Saturn now and getting ready to oppose Neptune, and Mercury already having opposed Saturn, and Venus, when it comes in October, opposing Saturn and Neptune, where these leaks and this stressful energy, the seriousness with which we have to tackle the crisis in the Pisces part of our chart that's been going on since 2013, 14, 15, 16, to all this turmoil in the Virgo part of our chart has to take into account how it is going to manage and balance and feed and heal to some extent. I would say, I don't think that whatever's going on in the Virgo part of the chart, I think that whatever's going on in the Virgo part of the chart, the first priority is to support the transformations in the Taurus and the Capricorn part of the chart. I think the transformation is occurring in the Virgo, Taurus, and the Capricorn part of the chart. But while these transformations are happening, the universe is also saying, do not take your eye off of Saturn, especially in Pisces. There's something there that needs to be healed and managed. And if you do not heal and manage and keep an eye out for it, whether it is new, fresh energies that are problematic or challenging or defensive or need defense or are leaks or deceptive or are creating loss in the Pisces part of the chart, or it is looking at older energies, do not lose sight of managing and keeping an eye on and correcting and healing that part of the chart, because in doing so, you will provide this transformation in the Virgo Capricorn Taurus triangle. You will give it a more solid foundation. Refer back to the Pisces full moon video I did. But these three transits, trining Uranus, opposing Neptune, trining Pluto, sorry to do this while I'm still here, like talking to you, but I want to see what this date is. October 8th. No, sorry. October 3rd. October 3rd. October 3rd. So September 30th, Mercury trines Uranus, and it ends its shadow period, its shadow degrees, just as it ends its shadow degrees, shadow period. October 30th, it trines Uranus. Not lost on me. October 2nd, it opposes Neptune. October 4th, it trines Pluto on its way into Libra. That's when those trines will occur. That's when those aspects will occur. Those transits will occur. So one of the things I said, the error that I wanted to correct, the other aspect that Mercury was about to make and did not make, and this is true for both Venus and Mercury, and I find this really fascinating, is that both Venus and Mercury were about to conjunct Mars when they went retrograde. Shall I meet up with the male planet, the hunter-gatherer, the pursuer of goals, the making things happen, rolling up his sleeves, Mars being the male planet, and all of us, irrespective of what our gender identification is. This principle, this testosterone-fueled principle that goes out into the world to make things happen, to protect our boundaries, to pursue our goals. Venus, an extremely important conjunction whenever Venus conjuncts Mars, the female receptive, the the bounteous side of us, the side of us that is connected to universal flow, meeting up with the male counterpart. But it did not happen in Leo because Venus said, reverse, not ready. Mercury, planet of communication, transactions, plans, contracts, getting ready to meet up with Mars and make things happen, goes, wait, not ready, and went retrograde. When I did the Mercury retrograde video, I said that Mercury would conjunct Mars correctly on October 29th, but I said it would be in the sign of Libra, and it's not. It's in the sign of Scorpio. And what is really fascinating to me is that that conjunction happens on October 29th, which is one day after the Taurus lunar eclipse. And this Mercury retrograde falling and occurring right now, as I said, the week before and week after August the 28th. And I said in this last video, if you look at if you superimpose your chart and the October 28th eclipse chart together, you may well be able to see things that are happening around you that correlate to whatever is happening at the time of the eclipse. Remember, the eclipse is in Taurus, but at the time of the eclipse in Taurus, when the moon and Uranus and Jupiter will be in Taurus, the Sun and Mercury and Mars will be in Scorpio. And if the North Node eclipse is in Taurus, it is in conversation with South Node energies in Scorpio. So Mercury and Mars will conjunct on October 29th, the day after the lunar eclipse, in Scorpio. The fourth and final transit that Mercury was not able to make because it went retrograde. So that's something I wanted to correct. It's not in Libra. The conjunction is not in Libra. It's in Scorpio. And fascinatingly, as I looked at the dates and looked at the charts and paid attention to what was going on and where things were at, I was like, oh my goodness, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating time, fascinating energies. Now, September the 6th is when Mercury, the retrograde Mercury, conjuncts the Sun. The most intense part of a Venus or Mercury or Mars retrograde is the time when they go retrograde and until they meet the Sun. Once they meet the Sun, the purpose of the retrograde occurs, so to speak. They burn off this old energy. They get in conversation with Source. There's a download or a conversation between the Sun and Venus, Mercury, or Mars. And after that conversation occurs, the planet is, in a sense, reborn, if you want to use that word. Born again. Cleaned up and infused with a new set of downloads. In Mercury's case, don't be surprised as you head towards September 6th that you really do get... Mercury is very much a planet of the mind. And the mind has its own particular relationship with the moon and our intuitive side. And, I've said this before, where if the Sun is the part of us that is connected to Source and where Source speaks to us, the moon and Mercury are the two entities that are closest to us in such a way that we can't necessarily separate them from our personality. In a lot of ancient traditions, the moon actually stands for us, not the Sun. The moon stands for our egoic personality as it engages with the world in its most elemental way, insofar as it represents our intuitive and emotional side. Mercury is the next level in the way, insofar as it represents our mind and our intellectual ability to make sense of the world around us and what is going on around us, and information and data. And both the moon and Mercury, these energies, are not easy to separate unless you are a proficient mindfulness meditator. The purpose, one could argue, of mindfulness meditation is so that you are constantly in contact with the solar part of yourself that is in touch with Source and is observing and represents our highest intelligence, and separates from our lunar and mercurial side, our emotional side, and our monkey mind, as it is known. By the time we get to Venus and Mars, our personality is being expressed a little bit more externally. There's effort involved. And by the time we get to Saturn and Jupiter, the conversation is now actively happening with Source, insofar as our day-to-day lives are being impacted, sort of a 50-50 conversation with those principles. By the time, and I've said this before, we get to Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, or Chiron, you are under their influence. You are no longer, they are no longer extensions. You're at their mercy. They are creating the changes that you're going to react to and grow from. Unlike with Jupiter and Saturn, where it's kind of a 50-50 deal. It's much more karmic. It's much more engaged with the world. It's much more about, what are you putting in, and so now I'll put this in. And what are you putting in, and now I'll put this in. Whether in Jupiter's case it is expansiveness, or whether in Saturn's case it is reward for good, clean, diligent effort and intention, or karma, in a more challenging, or punishment for poorly intended intentions or actions. So when a retrograde Mercury conjuncts the sun, Mercury is weak. It is combust. Not only is it retrograde, so around September the 6th or so, expect more Mercury retrograde-like things to happen. When it comes to Mercury retrograde, mundane snafus, delays, miscommunications, the three peak dates are the date when Mercury goes direct, the date when Mercury meets up with the sun, and the date when Mercury goes direct. August 23rd, September 6th, September 15th. So the couple of days around that is when you can expect that energy to peak. So plans going awry, you know, the needle of the compass just kind of spinning around, whether it's your mental compass or whether it's just, you know, not being able to, things not going according to plan and breaking down, and there being unforeseen delays. And of course, all of this is happening in Virgo. So it's the Virgo part of the chart that's going to be most impacted by things that are not in your control and that feel frustrating and that feel like Mercury retrograde things. And there'll be slowdowns in that part of the chart. There's not enough flow in the Virgo part of the chart. In the Gemini part of the chart, in the both Virgo and the Gemini part of the chart, things from the past may be vying, or people from the past may be vying for a certain amount of attention. Coming up, past issues, processing of past things, very retrograde energy. And with Mercury and Venus retrograde right now, whew, you know, this time period between August the 23rd and September the 4th, and we're kind of in the middle of it, is peak processing relationship woes from the past time. It's an internal process. When a retrograde Mercury conjuncts the sun, there is some sort of knowing that occurs. And the knowing very much feels like it is an intuitive knowing. Very often, Mercury's energies mess with lunar energies, where you know something intuitively, energetically, and when the mind gets involved to try to make sense of it, it isn't able to do so successfully. And that's what leads to something intuitive raising a red flag and us becoming paranoid or delusional, or coming up with scenarios to try and make sense of the intuitive red flag, which may be valid, but as the mind tries to make sense of it or come up with scenarios, it isn't able to do so successfully. There's no data, there's no clarity of a mental kind, there's no explanation, there's nobody being clear to you or telling you what's going. It's the knowing is much more intuitive, but it's an energetic pickup. When Mercury retrograde will conjunct the sun, something may come up that makes you go, okay, I got this, I see it. There's more of a connection between that intuitive and intellectual side of us. Because rather than the moon being involved, it comes straight from solar source to say, do you see this? And also, as we said on September 6th, there's a new communication cycle related to the sign of Virgo. Between September 6th, for some astrologers, between September 6th and Mercury going direct on September 15th, it's kind of a requirements development, requirements definition phase. What do I want to do in the sign? What do I want to achieve in the sign of Virgo? Till December, January of this year. Then from the time when Mercury goes direct to when Mercury meets up with the sun again, this time direct, it's action orientation. Then from that conjunction with the sun to when Mercury goes retrograde again in December is tweaking the results, seeing the results, and then when Mercury goes retrograde to when it conjuncts the sun retrograde and starts up a new cycle, it's closing out, finishing up the Mercury cycle. Okay. Um, the shadow period, I'm repeating some stuff that I said in the Mercury retrograde video, started on August the 3rd for Mercury retrograde, ends on October the 2nd with Mercury going direct on September 15th. Mercury will trine Jupiter in Taurus 3 times. It only opposes Saturn and Neptune once. And of course, as it leaves, it trines Uranus, opposes Neptune, and trines Pluto. And then finally, on October 29th, conjuncts Mars. And that Mars conjunction and that lunar eclipse in Taurus, very much in conversation with this particular time. It being, I don't know why, 2 months before a lunar eclipse carries such weight, but it does. If you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, it's a different experience. You might find yourself typically out of sync with the world. Your own sense of time, your own sense of taking your time when having conversations. Other people may perceive you as someone who could be late often or not really have a handle on mercurial activities, planning, time, showing up on time, meetings, being succinct, being concise, taking a long time to say things, conversation, being deliberate. But when Mercury, and in general, you might find that it's hard for you to be decisive for much of the year, but when Mercury is retrograde is when you are in sync with the energy and can be decisive. And I find for my clients who have Mercury retrograde in their birth chart that it can be a much more decisive time. What action am I going to take? Okay, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, this is the direction I'm going to move in. From an overall perspective, as I've mentioned to you, with these retrogrades, it's a pregnant time, and there could very much be opportunities that are in the mix, and particularly at the time when Venus was going retrograde, July 23rd. And even till now, there could be movement. There could even be forward movement of a kind, except that don't be fooled. The real forward movement, gate number 1, opens after September the 4th when Venus goes direct. The second gate, or the most important gate, opens after Mercury goes direct September 15th. And until September 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, you may find that you are still very much in planning and worry mode. Where am I going? What is it going to happen? What are going to be my obstacles? What is going to be in my way? How will I solve this? Is this the right way to deal with this? Is this the right plan? If we go with that metaphor example of boarding a plane by the end of September, middle of October, those of you who watched yesterday's video know I'm recovering from a cough. If we go with that metaphor of boarding a plane by the end of September or the middle of October, then it's this whole thing about, well, what am I going to do with this? And what am I going to do with that? And is this going to get wrapped up in time? And is this the plane I should catch? Or did I make the right booking? Or am I going to have to change this? And I thought I would leave the pet here. And I thought this was what was going to happen with so-and-so schoolwork. And I thought this was very important to remain in an open place with all these options being looked at and understand that it might take you 3 times as long to reach decisions. And especially if you have made any plans, between August 20th to September 18th, they may need to change and evolve. And if you're actually having to execute on things during this time, the Mercury retrograde time, there could be weird Mercury retrograde things happening. Lost baggage, lost this, lost that, travel delays, meeting delays, technology delays, communication delays, things out of your control that create challenges and delays and make things take longer. But it is characteristic of this time when we are in expansive mode, when we have considered opportunities and dealt with a certain amount of forward movement until August 20th or so, say, with a plan of action that then starts to move us forward after September the 18th or so, say, to be in this Mercury retrograde period where we're like, okay, so I'm going to do this. This hasn't come through. What is it going to be? Is it going to be this one? Is it going to be this door I'm going to walk through? Is it going to be that door? Okay, let's say I'm walking through that, but I've got to still make these plans now. And I was thinking this, but is that and this is the characteristic part of it. I was thinking this, but I am not, I think it needs to be that kind of planning. Lean into that and stay with it, because you might find the right solution through that kind of equivocation. And then once Mercury goes direct, you're like, all right, what I thought and the things that I was settling on and the things that I had started to entertain more and more, hopefully they will make sense to you, and hopefully they will be the right things to do as you get ready over the next 15 to 30 days to be on your way towards those plans. And yes, don't expect the Virgo and the Gemini part of the chart to gallop forward while Mercury is retrograde, and expect, especially in the Gemini part of the chart, the Virgo part of the chart is just slowdowns and delays and things not flowing as much and challenges and rethinking things and considering new beginnings in the Virgo part of the chart, a new Virgo cycle, September 6th. Can't make this up. But in both parts of the chart, but in both the Virgo and the Gemini parts of the chart, prior things resurrecting themselves, and for another week or so, ruminating on relationship and financial issues, because Mercury and Venus are both retrograde. With retrograde Venus, Venus has already retrograde conjuncted the Sun. Goes direct on September the 3rd. During its retrograde, squares Jupiter, squares Uranus, trines Chiron, has already conjuncted Mercury, has already conjuncted the Sun on August the 13th. So July 23rd to August the 13th may have been the most intense part of, particularly those 5 or 6 days leading up to August the 13th, the most intense part of a Venus retrograde, reconsidering relationships, but especially financial tightness, as the universe is saying, and I refer you back to my Venus retrograde video, are you clear about where you're going and what is in your heart? And do you have the resources and the relationships to take you there? Who is going to be a leak, relationship-wise? Where are the leaks financially? What happens if finances and relationships are restricted? Clean up the financial and relationship as part of your house. So as you got to August the 13th, Venus conjuncted the Sun, and July 23rd to August the 13th, and particularly those 4 or 5 days leading to August the 13th, could have been pretty gnarly, especially financially. But the relationship, and Venus is still retrograde, but it has moved away from the Sun. And so now it is incorporating our divine feminine till September the 3rd, processing a new graduated incorporation of our divine feminine. And when Venus goes direct on September the 3rd, the expectation is, although I'm sure we will falter, that this fresher divine feminine part of us, no matter what your gender or gender identification, especially when it concerns our creativity, but especially our relationships and finances, will be that much more together and contained and clear about who she's going to let in and partner with relationship-wise and spend her time with and share her confidences with, and who and just exactly how she's going to be managing her resources. So Venus retrograde means that these things are still being ruminated and still tight. And the Leo part of our chart, and slowdowns, things not yet moving forward in the Taurus and Libra part of the chart, because Venus is still retrograde. That's why the first gate that needs to open to actually start the manifestation process of what's actually coming up starts for us after September the 3rd. And the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, my next video is going to be about those few days and everything that's happening around that time. When Mercury goes direct, as I said, on September the 15th, our mental planning around which way am I going to go, how I'm going to do this, what are the obstacles, what do I have to do, what do I have to put in place, can cease, so that we are, but that, again, it does not mean that there may not be things that actually have to be done and dealt with before then, but just expect things to go awry until then. But with Venus retrograde and Venus Mars conjunct in Aquarius on February 22nd, remember when I told you that Venus was going to conjunct Mars and she didn't? So she's going to conjunct Mars. So whatever this Venus retrograde cycle is doing is building towards something. So insofar as Venus retrograde is saying, who's going to be in the boat with you and how are you going to manage your resources? How are you going to be lean and mean? How are you going to be wise? How are you going to be sensible? Do you understand that your resources and the people in your life are a gift from source? The quality of your abundance is dependent on the quality of your relationships. Very Venusian. Where's the toxicity? And with toxicity, it's a deadly combination between the other party and us. We often focus on the other party, but it's a dance with Venus. Because we bring something to the table as well that creates space for that kind of energy. And one of the lovely things about Venus retrograde is that she can be ruthless when retrograde, when going, I know you're into these particular relationships. It doesn't have to be a romantic way. It can be any type. It can be family, friends, it can be whatever, colleagues. But can you not see that they are not on your side? And there's something about your interaction with them that is, you need to graduate from that. That are drains. But it's not just about the other party, it's also about us. And from a resource perspective with Venus retrograde, as I said in the Venus retrograde video, we are not, our eye is not, the resources are there to serve us. We're not here just to serve our expenses. Our expenses are here to serve where we want to go. So the downloads around this occurred as you headed towards August the 13th. We are still in incorporation mode, although more and more is being released to us with the expectation that we will be graduating. We're still processing, we're still learning, we're still stumbling, and when Venus goes direct on September 3rd, it's from a Venusian perspective, game on. Where do you want to go? Have you paid attention to your lessons? Are you in possession of yourself? And in Venus, it is a very self-possessed, clear about self-worth, loving towards everyone, but boundaried and clear about who she's going to let in and how far. And who she has been to attract a certain type of toxic energy, which she will stop doing. And which kind of relationship she will continue to nurture, but also significantly, how the hell is she going to manage her money? And with Mercury retrograde, everything is soupy right now. But that does not mean that opportunities have not been showing themselves. You know, in the middle, this is my final point. There are doors that you're meant to walk through, and more doors right now than you can walk through. So right now we are in that process of having knocked on everything or knocking on things and waiting to see which one or ones are going to be the ones that pull us in. But through that process, you still have to have a vision or clarity as to why it is that you're knocking on these doors, what is in your heart, what is it that you're going for, and once those doors open and you know which ones they're going to be, how you're going to manage yourself and get yourself there through those doors. And it's that pregnant area space that we are currently in. So that even if you feel like you're making some sort of progress or have made some sort of decision or have had some sort of offer or, God forbid, are traveling during Mercury's retrograde, and people do all the time. We all do. Even if they're actions that are forward movement, I would just say, just remember, outward manifestation of which doors you're going to be going through, different gates. September the 3rd, Venus goes direct. September the 15th, Mercury goes direct. And if by that time, by September 18th or so, we know which door we're going through, unlikely that we're actually boarding the plane till the end of September or the middle of October. But the energies keep clearing from there on. The September 14th new moon, trine Uranus in Virgo, trine Uranus in Taurus. I mean, in and of itself, an opportunity-filled new moon. The Leo new moon cycle that we're in, trine the North Node, opportunity filled. Only problem being 2 planets retrograde. Only problem with the Virgo new moon being Mercury, the ruler of the new moon, stationary. Change occurs like this. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps, until you're like, all right, I'm in the new apartment, for example. I'm on the plane. All right. Those are the points I wanted to make regarding the retrogrades at this point in time and to prepare you for the next couple of weeks. The most current energy is still the Pisces full moon. Video is done on that. There's a Mercury retrograde video, Venus retrograde video, Leo new moon video, and now this. Next video, I'm going to focus on the stuff that's going on September 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Thank you for your time. Comment, like, share. Thank you. Until next time.